Hi, my name's Caroline Sayedi, and I just want to make some short video clips just to share with you, to tell you a little bit about myself and about my experience with my daughter, and how I came to be doing what I'm doing now, really. I'm a mother of two children. I have a son, Jordan, and a daughter, Farah. And my son is now 25 and my daughter is now 23. Farah was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5, and back then in 1998 not a lot was known about autism, and there wasn't an awful lot of help or support in the way of how to help a child develop from autism. So I just wanted to give you a brief summary of how it was back then and how it is now, 23 years later, well, 21 years later since the diagnosis. So there was no help. I had to sort of look into things for myself. Even the doctors and paediatricians after diagnosis couldn't really offer any ways of helping us, apart from speech and language therapists, which wasn't that helpful, to be honest. And going on from that, we didn't have the internet or any mobile phones back then, and so I resorted to the Yellow Pages and was looking for a private speech and language therapist, because the NHS one that I'd been to see wanted to see me every 6 weeks or so, and I was looking for, at that point in time, thinking that a speech and language therapist would come to the house perhaps once a week in my naivety, to work with Farah to help her develop her speech. Anyway, that didn't happen, and through the Yellow Pages I found a private speech and language therapist, who at that time sadly I couldn't afford, but she was very helpful, and she sent me lots of information about the program that she used, and that was called the Handin Program, and it's a Canadian based program. Back then there was no early bird program through the National Autistic Society. In fact, the early bird program was based on the Hanan Program. That's another story. I was interested in looking more into the Hanan Program, which wasn't specifically for children with autism. It was just for children. It was for children with a speech and language delay or communication problems, as they called it. And it was called It Takes Two to Talk. And so anyway, I wanted to try and get the book. I went into lots of bookshops in Bristol, and finally one bookshop looked on their computer and managed to track a copy down and ordered it for me. And when I got it, I looked at all the information in there and found that there was a number for the UK director, telephone number, and I rang her and had a conversation with her, and she happened to tell me that there were, and I always get my 3s and 5s and 4s and 6s muddled up, so I think it was either 300 or 500 National Health Service speech and language therapists who were trained in the Handin Program that might be able to help me. So I got in touch with Farah's speech and language therapist, and said to her what I had heard, and asked her to find out where the nearest ones were to Bristol. And at first she sort of said, oh, there's no proof that that's going to help. And I said, well, there's no proof it's going to do any harm either, and I've spoken to the UK director and it's not going to harm her in any way, it can only help. And I'd like you to find out if there are any speech and language therapists trained in the Handin Program that live in Bristol or around Bristol or outside of Bristol, wherever they are. So eventually, after chasing her up a couple of weeks later, she got back to me, and it happened to be that there were 2 speech and language therapists trained in the Handin Program in Bristol, and at that time they worked for the Phoenix Trust, and they were running a new program for parents in the September in the area that we were then moving to in the August. So I contacted them and I asked for us to have, me and my husband to have our names put down, and that was our very first introduction to helping our daughter talk, really. At that time we never had the diagnosis. We just knew that she was language delayed, and she was having tests and different assessments and things at the time. It was only through going to the Handin Program, meeting other parents there in the group and realising that their children had a diagnosis of autism, that I started to think, well, maybe that's what they think Farah's got. So, and it was really through the Handin Program that other opportunities developed, and we were able to find other therapies and interventions and connect with other places that could help us out. So that's where it all began, and obviously at another point in time I will go into more detail about that and about all the other therapies that we've done. But just wanted to give you a bit of an outline really of where it all started. I mean, Farah was non-verbal. She would watch the television and sway while she was watching the telly. You could go behind her and call her name or shout or clap your hands, and she wouldn't turn around, and she wouldn't take any notice of the noises or sounds around her. And she would hand flap, and she wasn't talking, and so it was a very hard time at the time. We didn't really know what was going on, and eventually, I'm just going to quickly whiz through. I managed to get her a place at the Social Services Nursery School, where she learned Makaton signing. And then she also went to our local play group, where we had amazing support, and I paid for extra support worker to work with her. And she got statemented at nursery school, went to our local, very academic, mainstream infant school. That's a story in itself, which I'll tell you one day. And that didn't work out. That was very painful for not just my daughter, but my son, who is 2 years older and was in the year above Farah at school, because his birthday, although there's 2 years between them, academically he's like one of the oldest in the year and she's one of the youngest. So I moved her out of there, and she went to what was then the only autistic unit in Bristol, attached to a mainstream school the other side of town. So she went to an autistic unit for primary school. She then went on to secondary school, which was also an autistic, they called it a centre, attached to a mainstream secondary school, which was actually closer to where we live now, and was always taxied to and from school. She had a lot of inclusion at primary school. It was a brilliant primary school back then. The new secondary school autism centre was new, and inclusion wasn't so inclusive, which she struggled with for a while. But she did leave primary school having done SATs, and in the original mainstream school, the head teacher wasn't even going to do a baseline assessment of her abilities, and I insisted, because I said, well, how will we know how she's improving or what her progress is? So at the end of primary school, she did do her SATs, and she got similar grades to the mainstream children, some of them better. She got like 2s and 3s, something like that, whereas our mainstream academic school, you know, the score was like 6 or something out of 5s and 6s, 4 5s and 6s. So she went to the Autism Centre for secondary school. She had inclusion for a BTEC level 2 in dance because I started off with dancing and trampolining and lots of other things that I'm going to share with you in other videos. And then she left secondary school with entry-level exam qualifications in English, Maths, Science, ICT, Food Studies, Childcare, and a BTEC level 2 in dance. And at that point, she was able to say, Mum, I don't want to be in special school anymore. I want to be in mainstream school or mainstream college. I don't want to go to a special college. So I thought, well, actually, I've spent all these years having to make the decisions for her. And now, it's time for me to listen to her decisions and support her in those. So with the help of a brilliant connections officer, we were guided to look at a sixth form college where they took students at 16 at functional skills level, actually, and also those that wanted to retake GCSEs and stuff like that. So anyway, Farah went to a sixth form college where she started at functional skills level 1 in English and Maths and ICT BTEC level 1. Her second year she did functional skills level 2 in English and Maths, I think. Oh, she did GCSE Maths in the end, and level 2 OCR in ICT. And then she also did a lot of enrichment activities. She did photography and art and lots of other stuff. And she eventually did AS levels and A levels, and she left with 2 A levels. And then she went to she went on to Western College, where she did a University of Arts London diploma in textiles and got a distinction. And then through that she ended up getting a place at, well, she got interviews at 4 different universities and she got her second choice, which was Plymouth. And she is now at Plymouth doing a degree in a Bachelor's of Arts BA Honours in Textile Practices, and she's in her final year when she goes back in September. And she's done an awful lot of other stuff as well. She's done Duke of Edinburgh Award, Citizenship Award, she's done dancing, she's been in Team GB and done trampolining and for the Disability Squad and loads more that I want to share with you, because I really want you parents to know that I know how dark it is. I know how awful it is to receive that diagnosis. You feel like all your dreams have been shattered, and that all your dreams for your daughter or son, how can they achieve those things, and or do what they want to do and just be who they want to be. And your whole life changes when you get that diagnosis, I found. I mean, it might not be the same for other parents, and that's wonderful, if it's not. But as a mum, my biggest worry was, what's her future hold for her? Will she be reliant on her brother for the rest of her life? Will he have to look after her for the rest of her life? And how can I make her as independent as possible? And believe me, I had no idea she would be doing what she's doing now. I couldn't even imagine that. So I just want to give you all some hope and inspiration, and know that where there's a will, there's a way, and that it's not all about academics. It's not all about achieving those kind of qualifications. It's about helping your child to learn to communicate and socialise and enjoy life and be the best they can be, and hopefully be as independent as they can be, so that when we're no longer here, they can live life. And so that's really why I'm sharing my journey and my story, and that's why I offer the services that I do, and that's why I've done so much study myself and learned so many different modalities and things like that and therapies, because I want to help you, and I want to help other children and adults as well achieve their full potential and live happy and fulfilling lives. So that's the end of my speech, and I really hope that that you'd like to follow me and listen to hear what I have to share with you. And I hope to see you again. Bye for now.